previous episode, we spoke about the feast of the future. We've discussed the various statements of our sages referring to a great feast that will take place in the future and the various approaches of the different commentaries, whether it's a physical delight, a spiritual delight. There are many different things on the menu for that meal as discussed in various sources. In today's episode, I want to focus on one specific thing on the menu, which is the wine that will be served at that meal. And our sages speak about this in a few places. First place our sages speak about this is in the Masechta Brachos, in Tractate Brachos, Daf Lamedal Damid Beis. Our sages bring a verse. It says, "Ayin leirasa lekim zelasecha yasel mechakaloi." That Hashem, there's something that only the eye of God Himself has seen, no other eye of any being has ever seen, and Hashem will do this for those that await Him. And our sages ask, what is this referring to? What is this type of reward that only the eye of Hashem Himself has ever seen? And our sages explain that Rabbi Sholom ben Levi says, "Zeh yayin hamashumer banavav mishesh yismei bereishis." This is the wine that is kept in its grapes from the 6 days of creation. And the Talmud goes on to discuss other interpretations that it goes on the level of Eden. We know that when Adam Rishon, the first man, was created, he was placed in the Garden of Eden. But the Garden of Eden is the Garden of Eden. There's the garden and there's Eden. There's the level which is even higher than the Garden of Eden, which even the first man ever experienced, never saw. And that is what's going to be revealed in the future era. Now, obviously, just from a very brief analysis of this passage, we're talking here about something so great, so lofty, that only the eye of God Himself has seen. It obviously would be very strange to interpret this passage simply on a literal sense to mean that there's special wine that's kept in its grapes in the 6 days of creation. I mean, probably the angels and other entities are aware of such a thing. So what does it mean that we're talking here about a very great, lofty level? And as the Talmud goes on in the further interpretation, we're talking about a level of Eden, which is even higher than the Garden of Eden. It's very, very high levels of spiritual delight. So how does that connect with this wine that is sitting in the grapes in the 6 days of creation? It might be a very great physical delight, but why is this something that only the eye of Hashem Himself has ever seen? So commentaries explain, as we've discussed in a previous episode, in general there are two approaches. Those that understand these statements as allegoric, metaphoric, and other commentaries interpret them literally. And there's no inherent contradiction necessarily. Even those that interpret them literally understand that they also have deeper meanings, but they also understand that they will happen very literally as well. So there is obviously the literal wine that is Meshumer Banavav that's waiting in its grapes in the 6 days of creation, which we'll discuss a little bit about soon. But there's obviously a deeper meaning, which is somewhat obvious to begin with, which is our sages in general refer to the idea of wine as secrets. Nichnas yain yotzes soid. Our sages say that when wine goes in, secrets come out. The word yain in Hebrew, yud yud nun, has a numerical value of 70, which is the same numerical value as the Hebrew word soid, which is samach vav daled, secret. So wine represents secrets. There are certain lofty secrets that are, so to say, hidden in their grapes in the 6 days of creation, which means that even from these are types of lofty levels of spiritual delight, spiritual wine brings joy. The revelation of secrets, of godly secrets, bring delight. This delight and this revelation of these secrets were not revealed from the beginning of creation. No created being has ever experienced this delight. It's ayin leirasa lekim zelasecha. These are secrets, so to say, that are kept by God Himself, revelations that are kept by God Himself. He never revealed them yet. And this is the delight that Hashem will give, Yasem and Mechakale, those that put their hope in God Himself and have sacrificed their physical comforts, their spiritual comforts in order to do the will of Hashem. So they will merit those secrets that Hashem had never revealed yet to anyone else. So that is, on a very basic level, that is the meaning of this passage, the way it's understood more in allegoric spiritual form. But obviously, we still need to understand why are we using specifically the term of wine that's still in its grapes from the 6 days of creation and so on. So the commentaries throughout the sages have explained this in various ways. According to the interpretation that we're talking here about physical wine that will be tasted in the future. So the explanation is as follows: wine that is aged is very good, right? We all know that. From the beginning of creation, Hashem created the wine that's on the most best wine that was ever created. That wine is still in his grapes. What does it mean it's in his grapes? Commentaries understand that to mean that usually you have to squeeze grapes to take out the wine. This wine is already prepared. It's within the grape itself. It's being kept in the grape. But within the grape itself, there's a pocket. There's places where the wine is stored as wine. It's not like the way wine is in grapes today, where you have to squeeze out the grapes and you gather the juice from all over the grape. But the wine is already there. Hashem already created this wine from the beginning of creation to serve at the future meal. And this wine is a very special taste, a very special delight. It doesn't have the word meshumar, which means it's kept. Also comes from the word shmodim. In Hebrew, the word shmira usually means protection. But regarding wine specifically, the term shmira, shmodim have a very specific term, sediment of wine. The bottom of the sediments that gather up at the bottom of the barrel, the bottom of the bottle, are referred to in Hebrew as shmodim. So yain hameshumar banavav means a wine that is free, well, at least according to one interpretation, that it's free of any sediment. It's a clear, pure wine. It's something that is not mixed with any sediment, and it's a very, very refined and pure type of creation. And it's still hidden away in his grapes. It's being kept secure as a liquid within the grapes from the 6 days of creation, which the reason why it was created in the 6 days of creation is because it was meant, as we know, that when Adam was created, everything was meant to be prepared for him. Even the delights of the future, as our sages say, that Adam was created the last of all other creations, in order that everything should be ready for the meal. Everything should be able to Yikanes l'suda miyad. If Adam wouldn't have sinned with the tree of knowledge, and he would have merited to have this delight, this enjoyment, a few hours after he was created, by Friday evening, by the onset of the first Shabbos. So from the beginning of creation, the purpose of creation was to experience the delights of the days of Moshiach, and therefore Hashem created this wine. Now, in addition to the physical meaning of the wine, and it's very clear, and it's still hidden in its grapes, and it's aged from the beginning of creation, and it's being kept away, stored away, especially for this meal, I want to also discuss some of the inner, deeper meanings behind this statement of our sages. So the commentaries mention an interesting point. There is an opinion, the tree of knowledge, with which Adam sinned, according to one opinion by our sages mentioned in Tractate Sanhedrin, was actually a geffen, was actually divine. Grapes says that Chava took a cluster of grapes and she squeezed it. And the Torah doesn't clearly specify which tree was a tree of knowledge, and there are different opinions amongst the sages, but one opinion is that it was grapes. And according to this understanding, there's a very deep point over here, which means that Adam used the grapes. So he wanted to drink the wine and taste, the taste of wine and happiness from this tree, which he wasn't permitted to. And we all know what came as a result of the drinking of the wine that he drank at that time, the grapes that Chava squeezed for him, which caused death and destruction for the world. But in the future, this vine was originally meant, this ate the tree of knowledge, which is, according to this interpretation, is the vine where grapes grow. This was meant for the future, for Adam to benefit from. If he would have waited, as our sages say, he only had to wait. For prohibition from tasting from the grapes was only for a few hours. If he would have waited until the nightfall of Friday Eve when he was created, he would have used those grapes to squeeze wine to make Kiddush, to honor the coming in of Shabbos. So Adam couldn't wait for those few hours, and he had benefit of the grapes, and it caused destruction. In the future, we will rectify the sin of Adam, and then we will be able to have those grapes from that tree, but then it will be refined in the sense that there won't be any evil that will come out from that drinking of the wine. On the contrary, the experience of the future won't be good, the tree of knowledge of good and evil, that there's evil mixed in, but it will be purely good, which transcends any trace of evil. So this drinking of this wine is not just, how good the wine is, but also represents the whole narrative of history of the sin and the good and evil that came into the world as a result, the mixture of good and evil, and the rectification, the refinement of evil, the refinement of this tree of knowledge that will happen in the future. Other commentaries give other interesting analogies, interpretations regarding this wine that's hidden in the grapes. One interpretation is more of a simpler understanding, but they explain as follows. If a person never tasted wine in his life and he eats grapes, and he doesn't know that there's such a possibility of squeezing the grapes to bring out the grape juice, to bring out the wine. So in his mind, he will never imagine that they could exist in the tapes, particularly if the grapes are very tasty and delicious. You could never imagine that there's something even more delightful than the grapes. It's only once somebody shows him how to squeeze wine, and the grapes, how to squeeze grapes and to extract wine, and the wine is, the wine develops properly and so on, then he'll realize that there's a much greater delight that he could experience more than the grapes. He thought that the grapes were the top of the list. Little did he know that there's something hidden within the grapes that's much greater. And the same thing is that a person fulfills mitzvahs in this world, so he doesn't think, he might feel the mitzvahs and, give him a burst of energy, of connection to Hashem, but he thinks whatever he's experiencing in this world, by fulfilling Torah mitzvahs, by being connected to Hashem, that the delight that he experiences, that's all that there is. It might be very good and beautiful and invigorating and so on and so forth, but he can't imagine that there's a deeper experience, there's a deeper joy, a deeper delight that's inherent there. And this is what we're saying, is that the grapes, so to say, and according to this allegoric interpretation, the grapes you might have tasted, but there's wine that's hidden in the grapes. So in the beginning of creation, there's Hashem embedded in the mitzvahs that you're doing, and you're experiencing something even deeper, which you're not aware of. And only in the future, when we'll extract the wine, we'll be able to realize the great connection to Hashem and the great delight that you've never realized was really embedded in the grapes, and the pleasure and the limited pleasure that you had now really contains something much deeper. There is another point that commentaries explain, going back to the idea I mentioned before, that the word meshumor means that there's no shmorim, there's no sediment, and they explain that joy today, any delight that one experiences, is not 100%. There's negative in the world, there's always something wrong in the world, there's no full-fledged joy that we could experience today. So even wine, which wine is usually associated with joy, yayin yisamach levav enosh, as the verse said, wine gladdens the heart of man. Even wine that we experience today, the joy of wine that we experience today, is limited. It fades off. It's not the joy that we're experiencing might be covering over some sorrow, some type of pain that we're having. But the future joy will be perfect. That time, as we've discussed in the past, will be complete joy. Moshiach will make us, there won't be any more memory of all the different tragedies of the past. At that point, the joy we will experience will be a true 100% perfect joy. And that's the idea that there's the Yain HaMeshumar Banav of Mishesh Yismei B'Reisha. So in the beginning of creation, as we mentioned before, if not for Adam's sin, there would be no evil in the world. The beginning of creation, there was Hashem already pre-designated a joy, a bliss, a delight that is perfectly delightful, that there's no, it's not mixed in, or it's not tinted by any pain or sorrow or any feeling of loss that we have in today's day and age. However, we didn't merit for that delight to be able to come manifest due to the sin of Adam, the sin of the tree of knowledge. In the future, it's not just we will drink wine, but the wine representing the happiness, the joy, will be perfect, will be the way it was meant to be in the beginning of creation, before the sin of Adam, before the sin of the tree of knowledge, which is what we refer to, what we mean by saying that is from the 6 days of creation, meaning preceding all the negative occurrences that developed afterwards as a result of the sin. But this wine preceded that, and this wine, this delight, is what's going to become manifest in the future. From a Chassidic interpretation, Chassidus discusses this also, particularly within the context of another teaching of our sages, which speak about that at the end of the future meal that will be made in the future, it says that will be the cup of blessing. We know that according to Jewish law, after we eat, we say grace after meals, birchas hamazon, and if there's a few people eating together, there's one that leads the zimun, one that leads the service, and you do it over a cup of wine. And that cup of wine will be from the Yain HaMeshumer. That cup of wine, it says that King David HaMelech will be the one to bless at the end of the meal, and that wine will be from this Yain HaMeshumer, from this, that cup will be from the special wine. And the Rebbe explains that it's, if you look in Torah, it was customary for people to drink wine also middle of the meal. And the Rebbe explains that during the meal there will also be wine, but the wine at the end of the meal represents the highest level of wine, which basically means that there's the secrets of Torah, which as we mentioned before, wine, which will be relevant during the meal. But then there's going to be the highest secrets of Torah, which is called Razin de Razin, even the deepest secrets, like we mentioned before, those things that are hidden away, that were never revealed. They're beyond revelation at this point in history, at this point, until, in other words, they're set away, but they're not revealed yet. And they will be revealed at the drinking of this cup of blessing at the end of the meal represents a revelation of those secrets. And Chassidus explains that joy is, what does joy come from? Joy comes from revelation. Joy is an experience where a person feels a certain feeling of goodness, of happiness, of joy. The feeling of happiness and joy could be good and bad. It could be sometimes a person, even we're talking about it, a holy joy, a simcha, any form of simcha, of delight has great potential. Simcha peiris geders, joy breaks boundaries, etc. But when a person experiences joy, he feels himself, he's happy. And that feeling of self-happiness, of being happy, that could give a boost. Afterwards, a person could have a very great experience of joy. But afterwards, it could, once he's on a high, then it could express itself sometimes in negative things as well. So any time a person is in a state of hergesh, he feels good about something, he feels good about himself, he feels good whatever it is. So at that point, he has to be careful, because he could start feeling himself and his own desires too much. And when he's on a high, he might be originally on a high because of a very good reason, because of a spiritual experience he had. But if he doesn't control himself, that feeling of a high could make him feel like he just wants to do whatever he wants, and eventually could go in the wrong direction. And Chassidus discusses this a lot, about the idea of Adam trying to take from this, from the grapes, as mentioned before. Adam wanted to experience a certain feeling of joy, of pleasure, but joy and pleasure could sometimes involve a certain sense of self. You're enjoying it, you feel a certain self-gratification, which could be very, very dangerous in the long run. What does it mean, wine that's hidden within the grapes? Chassidus explains that this means that there's a certain level of connection to Hashem where you are completely nullified. The wine doesn't exit the grapes. Your connection to Hashem doesn't give you any sense of self-feeling. It's at a point, just like we know that in the world of Atzilus, in the sublime spiritual world of Atzilus, the highest of the four worlds, of that world, everything is one with godliness. The later worlds, you have created beings which already feel themselves as separate from godliness. They might be completely nullified to Hashem, but they still feel a sense of their own independent existence. The world of Atzilus is not an independent world from Hashem. It's a world which is known as Eilam Ha'achdus, a world that's totally one with godliness. So the wine that we experience today is a wine of joy, of godly delight, which it comes into the world in a way that the world feels itself as a separate entity from godliness, and it's enjoying a godly revelation, which has very great potential, but that joy could sometimes, flow in the wrong direction. The joy of the future will be a much greater joy, but the joy will be in a way that the wine will remain in its grapes. We will be completely connected to Hashem, nullified to Hashem. We won't experience any sense of self. It will be nothing to do. The joy that we will experience won't give any credibility, any sense to doing something to any sense of feeling separate in some way from Hashem. And that is the ultimate type of joy that a person could feel, a joy where the joy is connected with Hashem. As we say, Nagila v'nismecha bach, that the joy that the Jewish people will experience will be a joy of being connected to Hashem. But that joy, the person is completely bonded with Hashem to the extent that he doesn't have any sense of self-joy. It's a joy of being completely bonded with Hashem. This is obviously a very, very lofty level of experience, of feeling such a connection, a very great, intense joy, but at the same time, it's free of any sense of self, of where a person feels at any small way separate from godliness. And this is a type of joy that will be experienced in the future. Hashem should help that we should all merit this joy. We should already experience the joy now, fulfill mitzvahs with joy, and to spread the revelations of the secrets of Torah that were given to us now as a foretaste of the future, by learning Chassidus, by delving into these secrets, trying to connect and be happy with our connection to Hashem. This will definitely boost our experience of the future joy. May it happen speedily in our days. Amen.